There you go.
Thank you. All right, so we send information to NESDEC every single year. What we discovered is this year we were preparing our document, sending it to them. They came back to us and said, there's a discrepancy. We're trying to figure out where it is. Turned out for the last 3 years, when we were sending our enrollment figures to NESDEC, we were sending them in a way that actually double counted some kids, not a lot of kids, but some kids. And we want to correct that. So what NESDEC is going to do is they're actually going to map back to when that mistake, that error started, because they can pull that information out of eRide. They can go back and look at our enrollment figures for previous years. And then they'll make the adjustment. So it's 1920, I think is the first year it was done incorrectly. So it's only 3 years. Make the adjustment in 1920, make the adjustment in 1920, 19-20.
When
Oh,
you had the right
gotcha.
to vote, we
Yeah, right. Women suffrage, all that. All the way down to the year that we're in now. And the reason why they're going to adjust it that way is because our enrollment has gone down. But if we don't adjust it across those 3-year span, it's going to look like a cliff. Because what we're reporting now is accurate and in the right fashion, but it's going to be less than what they have the previous year. So with them adjusting the 3 years, the slope is going to be a more gradual slope because our enrollment figures are down, but they're down over the course of a number of years versus how the discrepancy they discovered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So when we get those new enrollment figures, we'll put them in the report for Phil. We're going to put them in our budget for the town. And we know that our numbers are a little bit lower because our homeschool's a little bit higher, and some people have also, some people moved out, but now some new people moved in. So we might see some adjustment with that as well.
What does that do for the target populations of Hopkins Hill, TO, and Blackhawk?
So those 3 schools right now, and Amy can speak to this closer because she works with them every day. Those numbers are fairly close to where they're at right now. Today, like the number of kids in those rooms, those 3 buildings are right around between 325 and 335.
But what about 5 years out? Do we suspect that they will continue to slowly decline?
They had gone down for about a 3-year span, but then this year's kindergarten was bigger than we expected. We had actually eliminated some positions and had to add them back in over the summer because the numbers went back up. And I suspect with some of the building that's happened and homes that have sold, that we may see that go back up.
Hopkins Hill is, just so you know, is slightly larger than that. They're about 25 more larger, so they're about 350. The other ones are roughly right around those. They're within 10 up or down.
And Washington Oak is actually not quite 600. It's a little bit under 600, but that number also includes pre-K. And in our new construction, we're going to, I'll do one, you can do the other, keep it on. In our new construction, we'll have to consider adding pre-K space at the new building, which would probably offset a little bit of what's being used at Washington Oak.
Excellent. Next slide. So some of the criteria that we looked at, we presented to the town council when we were gathering our data was the deferred maintenance, the facility condition index, its utilization, the capacity. We conducted some school tours as a group, so we had a good understanding of what the conditions were like. Next. We developed multiple scenarios, almost 9 scenarios that had various grade configuration, various school closures, what a phased approach or strategy would look like, and a variety of combinations were reviewed as we came up with the most current solution that we're going to be presenting. Next. Keeping in mind that we want to maximize our incentives, maximize the student impact, make sure we protect the assets that we have in place, scale the projects, and of course, recognize funding limits.
If I could jump in here, I think this is a place where Mr. Pascal's questions about different budgets are important to consider because a $40 million project is not going to get us to school. It's not going to get us the incentives that we're looking for. So sure, we could do that and we can bond for that, but it's not going to really be the benefit to the community that we're looking
Do
for.
that
this.
anytime.
Correct. And a $65 million bond, and we have to just do a better job explaining it, just gets us probably one building, but it doesn't give us any of the other work that we're looking to do in our community to raise the bar like, for everybody.
Of course, we know that the Coventry School facility needs are great, and that this is really the beginning of a 20-year plan that will have multiple capital improvements, while maintaining some reoccurring maintenance throughout the entire process. Next. We had developed a scenario where we were presenting multiple projects at various levels. For example, at the $65 million level, we really are only going to be doing select asset protection across all of your buildings. We would not be recognizing the maximum bonuses from the incentives. A better solution at that time was to do some of that select asset protection, but then consider an elementary school consolidation. That certainly would allow us to maximize the bonus. But through further discussions and some research that we're going to be presenting here, we're bringing to you what we're going to call the best project right now, which is, actually, that should be 95 million. I want that to be 95 million, and I'll tell you how we get there. And it is consolidating all 3 elementary schools now, Tyo, Hopkins Hill, and Black Rock. And basically, we'll show you the pathway of how we would do that. Next. So again, the first part of the project would be to consolidate Hopkins Hill, Black Rock, and Tyo, build almost 1,000 student elementary school at the Flat River Road. And the formatting is off here running through the machine, but that's all right. You see that we would close these 3 schools, 1 new building. Next. This, well, that's all right, go back to that one, just so that we could fit your bus depot on the site as well as the 1,000 student school. Next. So let's start using the RIDE formula. 1,000 students, according to their guidelines, 145 square feet per student. That would yield a building of about 145,000. Current design that we just showed you is about 135 and could probably be tightened up even more. Based on a project-based teaching and learning model, which is a lot like Eden Park, which looks different than what your current elementary schools physically look like. Next slide. So if we use that 135,000 and we use $529 per square foot, and that is the new December 22 published guidelines per square foot, 529 times 135,000 is 71.4 million. Oh, this looks terrible, but all the math adds up still. To that, we add the furniture at 2.1 million, technology at 3 million, the building demolition at 1.7 million. That would bring us a total RIDE request reimbursement consideration of 78.2 million. All right. Next slide. The second part is the high priority facility improvements totaling 8 million. We took Western out of here because we moved.
Hold on, sorry.
Western was here for the well and the domestic water project. We moved that to the end of the other projects category. So the high impact facility improvements would be the building envelope and the fire suppression system. That's for 8 million. Next. We have our facility equity grant that we're pursuing for 5 million. That includes a number of projects: auditorium improvements to the high school, science lab improvements to the high school, gym and fitness renovations to the high school, and select restroom renovations at the middle school, totaling 5 million. And the fourth category is basically Western Coventry at 2 million, where the project is not just the well, but it's the domestic water distribution within the school, as well as, you know, high impact visual enhancements that can go along with those improvements to the distribution system in the school. Next. So the total project amount is consolidating Hopkins Hill, Tioga, and Black Rock at 80 million. The high priority facility improvements at 8, the facility equity initiatives at 5, and the other projects at Western, 2 million. That gets us to 95 million. Now, we'll go to the next slide. Well, we know our reimbursement. We're looking to maximize all our incentives to maximize that out at 69%. Next slide. So with an anticipated total project amount of 95 million, what are the strategies to reduce that? I'm gonna let Mario speak more about PAYGO and grant funding. We increased that from 8 million to 16 million. Bond premium, you notice this is targeting a $76 million bond at plus or minus 5%. That may be conservative at 3.25 million. Revenue from land sale based on acreage of 25,000 per acre. We have Hopkins Hill and Tioga are both similar at 10. Black Rock, by the way, sits on 27 acres. I'm only carrying 250,000 for that. That gives you an estimated project amount of 75.5 million, which is why we targeted a $76 million bond. What we had presented to town council was an $85 million project, still bonding for about 75 million. Today, we're presenting a $95 million project for bonding for almost the same. And Mario will speak to how we are going to accomplish that. Next slide. So at town council, we were talking about an $85 million project and seeking voter approval for up to 85 million to avoid confusion, because we were talking about an $85 million project. Well, here we're talking about a $95 million project that we only want to bond 76 million for. So this messaging requires some discussion, but maybe the message is, in addition to the 69% state reimbursement, additional upfront money from the state enables us to bond 76 million for a $95 million project, which would result in the most impactful and generational project Coventry has undertaken for their children in the school system. And again, that 95 is 80 million for Hopkins Hill, Tioga, and Black Rock, 8 million for the high priority facility improvements, 5 million for the facility equity initiative projects, 2 million for Western.
And I don't know if you said this, Phil, but, and Mario can add more to this, because we had a conference call. The equity initiative, we're asking for $5 million worth of projects, but we would not be required to reimburse $5 million because we would only have to reimburse our share based on the formula. So that would be, what, 1.7? It depends on where you come in. So that number could be adjusted a little bit.
Quick question on that. With that equity initiative projects, if this is all wrapped up into one, don't we get the 70%?
That's Mario.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So for these, well, the first piece is we're scoring next Thursday. We received 116 million applications from the tentative fix. So let's hope that we get all 5 of them. We'll score them. If you are picked, you on a upfront basis, we'll give you your piece. If you qualify for bonuses, yes, we'll give you another piece. So upfront, you would get your 50% plus the 10% if you do minority or women-owned businesses. So we would carry 60% for you. If you end up qualifying for those bonuses, we'll pay you as soon as the project is done and you qualify for it. We'll give you the remaining piece. You don't get it as you go because there's no guarantee that
You'll actually do it.
you'll actually do it.
Okay.
And
So we could get up to 70%
You have to be
because of the minority, right?
And when would you have to spend that money by?
giving everyone through June 30th, 2024.
So we really only have $1 million of our own money to spend on 5 million if we hit all our incentives.
Yeah, that actually what the state comes up with its for, and then you just put up your one. And if we go back, let's just go back one slide. So the biggest change in this was now with the commissioner yesterday, and we visited Hopkins Hill a few weeks ago. I don't know what the right word to use, but that small cafeteria bothers her very much. That she could lead to help Coventry. Okay. Well, one of the things we can do is, because we were at the last meeting, we were really close to getting you that third building as part of this. It would be wrong to size the cafeteria for all these students and gym and then not actually do it. So I said, all right, what if we get creative and find a way to maybe the PAYGO we gave them last time that they never got, which was 8 million, that maybe we do an adjustment and give them 16 million. She likes that idea. So it sounds like, so the beauty is we might put up more money up front which allows you to bond for the 76 million, which means you still keep 20 million in debt capacity, but you can actually do that third project now, not maybe do it in 5 years, because a lot can change between now and then. And you'll end up paying, the state will pay more and you'll pay more if you do this project in 5 years. So it's like a last minute, there was actually last night, this idea to see how it would go. But if the state will show up with extra money, then I think this one actually makes a lot of sense to just do 3 for 1 now. Plus you'll realize your operational savings now and not 5-6 years from now.
And you pick up 20 some acres at Black Rock. 27 acres.
That's right. So then that revenue number is likely going to be a little bit higher.
Yeah, that's conservative. That was only carrying either Hopkins or Tyoke.
So the PICO is sure fit.
Yeah, so you, eight of it, as long as you get approved in May, 8 million is guaranteed. We're trying to then guarantee you 16.
Okay, when would you know if you can guarantee us?
Very soon. We're pushing. So it's not, the nice thing is that it's Coventry and 3 others who we're trying to help. We're gonna help them all at once. So once we get, it actually helps that it's not just Coventry, but it's 3 other communities all seeking this. I would say the next few weeks we'll give you the answer with some certainty.
So before we have to make a decision,
Right.
January, February.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what's great, is
Yeah.
$8 million maybe is totally different than $8 million.
I agree. Plus, we'll also know by February the facility equity amount, so you can also tweak the thing up or down based on what's coming. I think from a frame, the plan B could be if that money doesn't arrive, then you go back to, all right, we do Hopkins, or we do Black Rock later, but if it arrives, you can make it like a very easy thing so you can keep moving. We don't want it to get to a place, pause, wait, and let's do something else now. So set it up in a way that you just chop that piece off and do it later, but I'm confident that we will.
But either way, right, what you're saying is the 8 is guaranteed, so either way, this scenario, we could still get all 3 even if that 75.5 goes
right.
back up to 83.
Right,
That's true, or you could just chop some of the other projects, and if you want to prioritize, let's say that other 8 doesn't arrive. You could say those priority projects, so what is it, the fire suppression system, something like that, you just defer those. And actually, that is actually a better use of bond funds to do the new building, but you could do that decision, just lop something off, the money doesn't come, but I'm hopeful in the next few weeks, maybe even maybe not the next meeting, but by the early January meeting, I want to have something even signed that says this is what.
all right, doesn't, if you get the pay go in advance, doesn't that decrease the amount of savings you get over the next 25 years?
So one of the things we will need to do is when you write your legislation, so some communities require the district to deduct pay-go from the bond, not all. But this only works if we don't write that, right?
Right.
If the voters say 75, you're gonna do 75, you can deduct premium, or you can do something else with that, but the pay-go has to be on top of it to make the math work. And the thought is, they're issuing what the voter for,
Right,
75,
the 75.
everything else just goes because you have needs that far exceed.
So what you're basically saying is we're decreasing the cap on the bond and therefore, and using that as pay go.
Yeah, another way to look at it is, you're doing a $95 million bond and deducting the pay-go to actually issue
Right,
76. So there's 2 ways to look at it.
Yeah.
Either, and it's better to not ask the voters for 95, you just ask them for 76.
Yeah.
And then put the pay-go on top of it. So I think that's a better approach than asking for more and saying, yeah, and then trying to explain this, all these deductions. And so-
I mean, that's what it's really gonna come down to, if we can call this, if we can bond 7 for 76.
Yeah, that would be the plan.
That's what we can sell. If we have to sell a bond for 95, but if we're only gonna issue
No.
76.
Let's not do that.
Yeah, and the next slide.
It ties
the
up our
next slide.
bonding capacity, right?
Only up to 76.
Well, I mean, if we
Oh, if
issue a
we
bond
have-
for 95, but
If,
only
if
use
we approve
76,
95 and these 76, we
can't.
can always issue the difference more. So that would be a tactical thing, because everything that's gonna get displaced from this building that's not in that project, you wanna renovate town hall, you wanna build a new public works complete building and operation to move the building office, the planning office, and, everything that's in this building now, then that would be like a separate project after the 76 to do a $6-8 million whatever. And it's already part of the pre-approved bond. So do
I
you want
see
to go
what
to
you're
the
saying.
public, do you want to
So
go to
you
the
go to
voters
85.
once for 95 Or do you want to go twice, once for 76 and another 8 later for public works?
With the difference, what we're doing on town projects, this may be scenario, that wouldn't get a reimbursement. from
No,
the
that's
state.
not part of
That's
this at
just
all.
bonded, we pay for
Right.
it. Okay,
So you simply.
Because we
bonded
don't
for-
have a plan for what happens to everything in this building.
right, no, that's the biggest question I've got from residents so far is, what are we gonna do with everything that happens at the end?
And the other thing is we would be vacating 3 buildings that we don't think are great for students, but we
Right.
could use them, just like we use this building, for office space, or even if it's for just a short amount of time until we figure out everything else. So even though we're looking at income from the sale of properties, we could hold one as a space that some of the offices here relocate to. What's gonna be tricky for the town and for the school is if we are able to move forward with this and we're in the construction phase, where do we go? Because
Is
those-
is that not part of the Guam solution? I thought we talked about Guam being converted to district offices.
I don't think that, there's not a place in Guam for us to go.
No, it would have to be built,
Yeah,
but it could be built ahead of demolition.
Yeah, but that's not factored in.
that's not factored in here, yeah. We scaled back the extent of those projects, recognizing that Don could go Oak Haven, Hopkins Hill, Tyoke.
Right.
Don can go to Oak
Live out of my truck.
Yeah, Don can go.
I mean, BlackRock's still the newest of them, and as a temporary facility,
It has the
Maybe
most
that's-
real estate.
maybe that's best, but maybe Hopkins Hill's closer and more functional.
Right, but during the construction phase, we might be able to go squat at Oak Haven because those schools won't be vacated. at that
Right, they
point.
won't be vacated.
We just need to figure out what we do with everybody else. That's the unanswered question.
I think that's a piece of it, and the other one is I had said it to Don, like, is preschool factored into where they're going? Like, because we were talking about preschool having to expand and 3 schools moving into that building.
Should there still be a spot for pre-K?
The plan that we've developed at 135,000 does have pre-K in it.
So that would move out of Washington Oak,
Either move out or would have 2
be in more than
locations.
one location.
Mario, can you explain, because I think it's something that is interesting and not everybody has the same understanding, including myself, in terms of the bond premium, how it works, and how other communities have capitalized on that opportunity?
Yes. So separate strategy is when you actually sell your bond, and I think we can also go to the timeline question, but so the way what bond premium works is when communities sell their bond, many times, it depends on the market, you might have people who bid more than it's worth. Investors pay more for your bond than it actually costs, which means there's a premium for money that goes on top of it. So in this case, the Johnson is the most recent example, who sold their bond, I would say it was in October, it was an $85 million bond. They took $8.5 million on top of it, that voters, that no one pays back, right? It's the investors are overpaying for your bond. In this case, and then so other examples, Providence took 26 million, Lincoln took 11 million, Newport took 14 million. Again, it's all subject to market conditions, but it's still available now. That if you get this approved, there is talk to your financial advisor, but you may want to sell sooner than you think, because if you can generate an extra $7.5 million of money that might pay for this town project you're talking about, you might not have to bond it all for that.
Are they getting 10%? About 10%?
I calculated.
Yeah, I know it's good to do the conservative one, but yeah, at the moment, they're hovering at 10 plus. So
With interest rates.
that might solve your,
Well, yeah,
yeah, that could solve your town issue. The town is not reimbursable. Take that, or you could take that to more school projects.
It's just a hard one to focus on because it's a big.
If we got 7.5, we lose 3.5 in this scenario to go to the town stuff, so. Yeah, it's.
So why do investors pay more than a bond's worth?
It's a variety of reasons. In some cases, some entities have like requirements that you have to put a certain amount of your money into buying these tax exempt bonds. For a while, there's companies that were losing money on these things just because
They need to have it.
they
Well,
have.
there's stable revenue, there's arbitrage where they can resell the bond for profit later.
Yeah.
Or different techniques.
So they just want municipal bonds in their portfolio.
Because municipal bonds are some of the most reliable, they always get paid.
And In this case, all these state bonds, these local bonds are backed by the state. So it's a guarantee that the investors are getting paid.
So that makes it even.
Whether you pay it or not, they're gonna take it out of your funding for it. So it's guaranteed by the state.
So I think that concluded the presentation. I think there was a chart on here, Harold, that you spoke to.
Yeah.
That just gave them some
Well, see, this.
debt service scenarios.
In this case, where the pay-go amount, that's where it's gonna fluctuate, because now you're going up to 18.
16.
Sorry, 16 million. So that's where it's gonna fluctuate, because then your net debt service is actually gonna be a little bit higher.
That doesn't make sense to me. I'm sorry, I don't know how that works exactly. We were paying a higher debt service every year because
Because.
we got the money up front.
Yeah, because you get the pay-go up front. So if you're doing the
So
principal
you're
and
paying out
interest,
immediately.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay. Sorry, I had to talk myself into it.
Do you have timeline built into this or no?
No, I think the next might have just been next steps and questions. Obviously, the immediate timeline is for us to present this again to school committee, town council, we have everyone on deck for our February 15th RIDE Stage 2 submission. Then there'll be a period of time where the school building authority is reviewing it. They'll ask us questions. We'll supply a supplement. And in May, around May, you will receive their recommendation to the council, and then it typically results in a rather anticlimactic piece of paper that says, this many square feet for this building for this amount. Please sign here.
And when does the legislation have to get done?
That has to be done now, like as soon as.
That's one of the other, you want to just go to the next item?
So I'll let Mr. Pearson kind of handle the agenda
All
there.
right, before we move on to timeline, any other questions on the presentation? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to review of project deadlines and timeline.
So for this one, in general, to get your project approved by the state, you need 3 approvals. They can come in any order. General assembly approval, which obviously is vetted by school committee and town council approval. You need RIDE approval. You need voter approval. They come in any order. The one here that we know is fixed is the RIDE approval is in May. And that we had an early discussion that would you want to move to next fall? I would advise against it because number one, your reimbursement rate drops by points. But even more so than PAYGO is a jeopardy because we expect a huge record next fall because that's when the bonuses begin to expire. So we have Pawtucket's $330 million project is coming. We have South Kingstown is doing $140 million, which you're working on. We have North Kingstown is in the mix. We have Providence, it's going to be over $1 billion. The PAYGO, the Charahoe now. Well,
Kids are so old.
they're all over.
It's a different meeting.
One quick story. They showed us a 2,000 student building. It went away. Now they're showing us a $5 million asset protection. So I don't know. But there's this. If we're going to rely on PAYGO, especially this additional PAYGO, you have to come in May. So at least that also helps for planning. That this date is fixed, which means February 15th is the day working. Check. So that there's no movement there. The other two you control. I think this answers one of his questions: is when do you want to do the vote? You don't have to vote in the spring. You could vote in the fall, but you do have to go to the General Assembly. So I would say first answer this is the first question: do you want to vote in the fall or the spring? Because that determines the urgency that you go to the General Assembly. Right? If you want to do spring, you have to go likely within the first 2 weeks to get it's like 60 or 90 days requirement for this to get on the ballot. So that should be answered soon. Is are we going to try for April, May? If no, that's fine. You have more time. But then you're really targeting most to November. If you're going to do special in the fall, most of November, that's when people are used to voting. You would look at that. So that's the first question, is to answer that. And then that determines when we have to go to the General Assembly, which then goes back to the question that I think Councilperson Ludwig has, like, well, when are we gonna vote on this number? Because that triggers actually everything. So if you're gonna vote in the fall, we can talk now. If you're gonna vote in the fall, then by February 15th, you would need town council approval and school committee approval for this. You know, the benefit, if you will, I guess, of the fall route is we would know in May if you got that extra money or not. And if you did, then you could approach the General Assembly right after it. You still have 6 weeks to push your enabling legislation through for the exact amount. So that's about the benefit there. And then you vote in November. The con of doing that is that you really are approaching the bonus deadlines. That if something goes wrong with one of your procurements, you miss the vote on 20 million, on this 20%, it's a lot of money. You miss perhaps for no reason. The flip side is you have to get to a number soon because you're not going to consider a losing number. You want some number that we would take to the town council. They would approve it, and then within, we would immediately send it to your reps in the Senate and the House, and they'll push it right through within a week. You pick a date to vote, either April or May. I think you have a professional development day or something in May, so it would make sense if you're going to use the schools. You might pick that day, May 10th, and then that's right around when you get right approval. So you would have everything wrapped up by May, which gives you then 7 months to get your contracts ready. So it's actually, you have much more time on that end. So those bonuses. So either route works, I think, but you have to hit February 15th, otherwise we line up here. One route in some ways.
Project complete, not shovels in the ground,
Project start,
project start.
and that's just sign contract. But if many times people are reluctant to issue contracts before the time of approval, so this thing goes down. So it'll be a really tight window that, and if I use one bit protest, this thing is
December is when shovels in the ground.
Project start.
just start, which is just sign contracts. We don't necessarily expect you to start down if the woods break. Just sign it and you have something ready to go. Some other districts are working with the General Assembly to see if that date can move to June 30th of 2024. It's the same fiscal year, just move it to the end of it. But don't bet on it. Like if it happens, great. Don't plan on it. Doesn't make it.
And there are some communities that do pre-work, selection of teams and contractors before the vote. So that if they are successful, then they are ready to roll. If they're not, then everybody just goes away.
I already talked to Mr. Norray, and he said he would do the legislation for us, just let him know what we needed and when, and he would do it, so we have him all ready to go. I just need to know what to tell him and when to tell him. But he'll do that part.
Organize a yes vote between now and May. With marketing and communication for the town.
We're definitely gonna have to hire somebody. You know, there's no way we can do a grassroots marketing campaign in that amount of time and think we're gonna be successful. So we're definitely gonna have to bring in somebody on board to help us. I think there's two schools of thought. I mean, sometimes we have a compressed timeline, you get people's interest. You don't have to hold their interest that long before they have to make a decision. If you do it the other way and you have a long timeline, you know, people begin to lose steam and energy, and you're trying to sustain marketing for a long time. And then when the vote actually comes, between apathy and everybody's schedules in life, people don't vote. I almost feel like, and why put us in a position where we're tight on timeline? What are you gonna say?
Managing the opposition too, because the more time you have, the more time the opposition has.
Right.
You vote no on everything. Somebody
There's
has
someone
that
with a
long
sign.
sign.
Yeah, that's Western.
Well, and the other thing is with the, and anybody can correct me, but I think now that we have a new budgeting process, we wouldn't ask, people wouldn't be voting on a budget at the same time, right? They'd be asked to be voting on this, which I think is beneficial, because people would commingle those two initiatives.
Yeah, I mean, this is really great because if there's a unanimous vote on the budget, it's done. And this won't be
Doesn't
complained
have to be
about.
unanimous.
Well, one is enough.
Mario, can you explain again what the known facts would be by May 10th? By May 10th, what would Coventry factually know?
So we'll know. Well, your ride approval will be there, so you'll know your amount. I'm sure I'll take it, but-
Yeah.
So you won't get some kind of meeting, so you'll know that. You'll know that what facility equity project, but anyway. You'll know what the school committee is up to and the town council support this not, yes, otherwise. you have to- Those will be known. Realistically, that adjustment, we'll try to get some letter that requires by council approval. We're targeting that adjustment for the other communities the same day that you get your necessity approval. But perhaps we can provide something ahead of time to give you some assurance, but the council is going to vote on all, of them, so you would know that same day. I suspect that if it gets on the agenda, they approve. We did a trial run in January. We altered the formula for 3 of them. They embraced it. They said it was great because that's how you should be using these. State funds should be given to districts who should give it to those who do need it. Especially if you can do the transformative project, that's the best use of those state funds as well. That'll be known. We need to decide before we likely to choose that route of when we want to go. That's actually a pivotal question because there's, if we're doing the spring, there's actually some urgency, some real urgency when it's. And if it's not, then we actually have until February to get all the approvals. You get them the same night. The resolution could be all at once. So the town usually has 3 things to approve. You have to approve stage 2. You have to approve sending a resolution to the General Assembly with an amount. And then you have to approve putting a question on your ballot at whatever day your election is. So you can do them all at once, or you can do them 3. But if you go for
We'll need to bring the town solicitor on board. Because this is all new and it'll take more time to get comfortable.
we have templates too, like some, Johnston they did a spring election last year. They give you the resolution, they did it all in one piece of paper, everyone voted for it, signed it, and it satisfied all the requirements. And they got the thing approved. That's like a 93% approval rating last. All there. But they have held a meeting, I want to say like the end of December. Give it to the reps who introduced it at the beginning of the session and sailed through. So again, there is some, you forget, and it sounds like, I don't know how realistic that is to pursue that, but we should decide sooner than later. So that drives a lot of.
So are you saying that if we decide to do a spring bond vote, that we would need to have another joint meeting before
Not
January?
necessarily. So this is one where you can, other communities like Portsmouth did this, where the town picks the number. They set the General Assembly route is a separate route that happens here. And if for whatever reason you decide in February, the school committee goes to plan to vote, it's not supporting it. But you say town said I'm not supporting this. You don't ever have to issue that. You don't have to even go to vote. Like the town council of Portsmouth got 65 million approved by the General Assembly, and they had second thoughts. Didn't even pursue it. You look, don't you look? Yeah. So, and then they turn around and did, I think it was 20, like some much smaller number. They had cold feet. They didn't want to take it to their voters. So in some ways, if there's a number that is comfortable, whether it's 76, and then we have 2 variations of it, whether if it's other money arrives, you do everything, if it doesn't, you chop something out. That might be a way to go, or if it's going to be not to exceed 85. Like you can figure out a strategy, and then you can decide at a later point in time, you know what, this plan doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's not binding.
Yeah, it's right. We're not going to take this plan to the voters because it doesn't make sense. But you at least start that route to allow you to have that equal vote. So that is a strategy, whether you want to pursue it or not. That is one. Take your number, send it, and if you don't like what you see, and the rest of the town council is like what they see.
So he could do a resolution to up to 85 million for the General Assembly vote?
You could, and then you can actually put, then take a lower numbers of voters. That's another way to do it. It's actually a good idea. You do a resolution for 85, but you may actually only ask for a specific 76 million. So that's not a bad idea. If the spring vote is the one that, not for the.
And the town approves that resolution.
Town council, right?
Town council approves that resolution.
They would go first.
Yeah, they would go first.
They would approve, again, in theory, not to exceed 85 million. It goes to General Assembly, that usually all of them get approved. For everything. It's a timing thing, and once you get that passed, then you can schedule your election. And then whether you make that question for a lower amount, do that, or you can even get them to approve up to 85, but never actually plan to issue. There's many communities who issue something. And you have to write it.
So if you do that, once we issue a bond, we start taxing on the full amount of the bond. I'm not exactly sure how that works.
So you vote, you get approval for the number, but then you can issue up to any amount up there. So some communities will do 3 bonds.
When do we start asking for money from residents?
Usually once you issue it, and again, we got a whole meeting on this, but some communities, they'll use a piece of their bond premium to cover the debt for 3 years, so that you might be able to go 3 years without paying it. Because other money is covering it. Usually, once you issue it, you get a full year. Like when you refinance, if they don't, you skip the payments, and usually get that first, if you issue after July 1st, you don't make payments that fiscal year, you make the next one. So part of it, another schedule is like, when do you need the money, you can map out that, but I would suspect from the moment you sell it, it's probably 1 or 2 years after that, you start.
So we have to also then consider strategically the best use of bond premium. Is it to pay interest? Is it to do another project? Is it to bring down the cost of this project? Like, what is the
Yeah, I think that's
strategic benefit of that?
right. That's why I think Steve Mazzaroni does a good job with those options. But if you have, realistically, if there are town projects going to do, and we still get reimbursed anyways, because you can always come to school projects and get 60% in the future, 50%.
The bond premium will go to the town, right?
Yeah,
Right.
the town issues bond.
Yeah,
bond.
Bond
Yeah,
premium goes to the town.
The one
I
thing,
mean, it's a strategic opportunity to decide how you're gonna use it. Pay down interest, pay down principal, do new projects, additional projects. There's a lot of options, and I think it really is gonna come down to the town council and how much appetite they have to kind of like this one project. You know, if you want to go all in, it's your one opportunity. Build a brand new public works facility, new animal shelter, which is a disgrace, and a new community center. And if you can do it between the bond premium, if you issue a bond for the full 95 million, but it's not just a school project, it's a school and town services, you're gonna buy down a lot of the no votes for all the people that don't have children that want paved roads and services. So, but it's going to that maximum stretch on this one-time opportunity because you think you can get the yes votes for it. But that hasn't been the message of the council up till now, because we're only talking about school projects. But if we're talking about the school project that's going to eliminate, 20,000 square feet of town space, where are we going to replace that? And if we don't have a plan to replace it, that's more reasons to vote no for the people that don't have kids in schools.
Yeah, I agree. I think the fact that we utilize this building, this is not an empty building. We have to have a plan for the people who work in this building and the organizations that utilize this building. So I think part of this project has to be depending on where we're gonna home with a lot of things.
No, it's all okay.
Don's going to okay.
With my
Amy's going
2005 Suburban.
The white whale.
Yeah.
So there was a jump between, let's say, bonding for 76 million. Then jumping to the 95 million. Is that delta of 20 million what we need to accommodate what's here? Or is like 85 million
I have
a
no idea.
a
So
plateau?
85 million would be nice if you have that extra 9 million over the 76 plus bond
But,
premium.
Yeah.
maybe that gets you to 95 without going to the full 95 bond issuance, but not knowing, because you put plus or minus on the bond premium, if you come up on the minus side, you're done. You're not gonna be able to do that, and will that kill the whole project because we have nowhere to put the displaced offices? So,
It almost makes another case for why a spring vote is better than a fall vote, because there's a little bit more accurate forecasting between now and May versus now and November. In terms of what things are looking like with rates.
and this is a really big decision for the community. And the town council's gonna need time to deliberate, decide what it feels comfortable, talk to their constituents. What is it that we're going to actually take to the voters?
And I almost wonder, going back to what Mario said earlier, if we can get a copy of what Johnston did, it would almost make more sense to try to give the town council everything they need to make one big decision at one time and be able to check two or three boxes at once, so then we can just move on. You said they voted for the bond, the referendum, the legislation, and there was a third thing.
They approved the stage 2.
That's right.
They approved the number to the General Assembly, and they approved the date for voters
Right.
to vote.
Then, do we have the strategic planning meeting set up? So I think we should try to get a special meeting set up where this is part of the conversation as well, because this is something that has to be discussed. It can't just come up and then we make a decision. There has to be some real discussion around it and questions asked that we can get answered.
I put out a bunch of dates in my communications and haven't heard back from anything, and with the change in leadership, there hasn't been as much communication.
We also, if we're gonna go this route, just planting the seed now, is that we want with whoever is gonna write the legislation, very careful that if you want to include town things, you have to say it, otherwise. you Can't really say, oh, yeah, we're gonna put this in town hall, and if your legislation doesn't allow it, then. you can't. And also,
So I thought you were saying that the 76 million for the school bond needs to be in the legislation, but if we approve more, that would also have to be in the legislation?
yeah, so if you're
We
going,
can't bifurcate the bond.
I think almost all municipal. Or you can separate the bond up. I think if you're gonna ask voters, well, you asking voters one question or two questions?
One.
One, so likely the legislation would be for everything.
I mean-
But only a piece that would get reimbursed. But be
Right,
careful,
the arguments against doing one is maybe you'll get more opposition to losing the whole thing, and it's a higher risk, where if you bifurcate it, they'll vote yes on one and no on the other, and I don't know where that leaves you.
Could you give us a good list of what is utilized, what is done in this building? How many people work here for the town? How many people work here for the school? How often it's used for other purposes and what those purposes are? Because I know quite a few things, I think, but people have thrown other things my way and I didn't even realize we did that in that building. So if we could get a good, strong grasp of what the needs are, once we take this building away, I think it would be helpful.
So when do we decide on this timeline? Like, should we schedule a meeting just to talk about timeline, another meeting, or we don't have some key members here. And I don't want to make too many big decisions without everybody's voice, but we need to really hone in on this.
how about, I'll write out the two options, and I'll attach the Johnston thing, and then we'll send it to, take a look. You forward it to whoever needs to have it. And you have to pick a day where you need to decide, and if this spring is too aggressive, that's fine. Let's at least know that, and then we can chart out a very detailed timeline.
Could we do, and I'm not trying to exclude anybody, so nobody take this the wrong way, could we do a smaller leadership meeting to talk deeper about the timeline and then have a bigger building committee meeting to kind of like really then talk about all the options? Because we could do that between now and the end of the school, well, the end of the calendar year, right? You know, everybody's gonna disappear in a few weeks, between holidays and travel and everything else. I don't see it likely that we're gonna have another building committee before the end of the school year, before the end of the calendar year, unless everybody thinks that
The
we should.
21st.
What's that?
I could do the 21st.
We could try to do that if people wanna do that. Otherwise, we're gonna have to wait to our January meeting. Now, I know the first January school committee meeting is the 12th. I don't know when the first meeting is for the town council, but if there's something that we need to get in front of them to vote for, there's a lot of work that has to happen.
So Don, in an email I sent you, I'm trying to pull up, I had all of those dates. And I do think I was suggesting meeting on the 21st.
Okay.
So give me a second.
Especially if we're gonna do a spring vote.
Tuesday, I don't think we plan to be on that.
Well, this was not even really whether you do a spring vote. I'm just trying to set this all up for the February 15th submission to RIDE. So
And based on our presentation and the questions we got, which I thought were very good, I wouldn't even assume a vote for a stage 2 is like a slam dunk, because I think there's a lot of questions that people want answered. And I think some of the town council members were like, we voted yes for stage 2 last time, and then the assumption was we supported this project, and then in the end, we didn't support the project, and it felt like we were backtracking. And I think they're gonna wanna really feel confident about what we're doing if they're gonna vote for the stage 2.
especially since we heard that they were frustrated by a change in the numbers,
Mhm.
which is what I actually just presented to you today.
Correct.
So we don't want, although there's value added in this, it needs to be presented again.
The biggest flaw right now is it's not a fully baked idea because of the disposition of what happens in this building. It's a loose end that doesn't pertain to the school building committee, but pertains to this town and the administration offices. So
I'm
having
fairly,
that conversation, I think, will be really helpful.
I'm fairly confident, and I can meet with Russ again, I'm fairly confident we could probably make our part of the building fit, not the bus part, but the office part fitted Oak Haven. We would have to do a lot of work to prepare for us to go over there, but there's like 6 empty classrooms and some other spaces that could be cleaned up and reorganized. But the bus depot is a whole separate conversation, because that's not just where you park them, it's where we also feel them back there.
What happened to wasn't an earlier version is at the middle school site, which has 100 acres? Is that off the table? Is that possible? If there's a savings that's less than a $6 million relocation, it might be worth.
It's not a developed site. It's not something you can just put the buses onto. It's wooded. It's.
You mean build the building?
I
But you say it's $6.5 million
I'm saying if you have to move all this somewhere, like what's the cost to do this at the middle school? If it's less than that, like why was that ruled out?
We started to go down this path that maybe that land might be restricted as open space. I had reached out to your new town planner, I think.
Okay, we shut her.
Yeah, but remember where we were planning in the other scheme right there. It's undeveloped and it may be protected. Why?
If it weren't protected,
Would we be,
I'm wondering if that costs less than than issuing a separate bond for the town to move people somewhere else.
I don't know. I'm just speculating.
I mean, that goes back to the traffic concerns with putting 1,000 students next to 1,000 students in a school.
Yeah.
and it is crazy over there, like pick up, no one takes the bus. Just picks up their kid. Yeah, my kid takes the bus. But I do agree that would be a problem, is the overlap in students. Especially because when the elementary school would be getting out, I think in certain instances, parents would be coming to pick kids up from after school programs at the middle school. And pretty hectic. One person's.
And not that it's a huge deal, but when we're thinking about bus depot, we're not just thinking about the buses. We're also thinking about the staff that run the buses. So in the back of this building, there's 2 office spaces and a break room for the people who run the buses. So wherever the buses go, there also needs to be an inside area for them to have their offices, that's where people call.
Would we have to move the buses during construction if we just have an access road for the buses? Because part of your project showed the buses staying here, right?
Yeah, moving the bus depot from the back where we would put the playgrounds to the front.
Well, if you did that first,
Right.
and you'd have to move the fuel to the front, the propane, and the lights, and we'd have to come up with an office space for them. But if you did that first, then it wouldn't be that big an issue. But if we're bulldozing that body,
mean-
that gazebo, we better have a plan for where they're gonna go.
If it's just temporary office space, you can get in, bring in mobiles.
All right, so I have the schedule I have here, maybe I just read it, give you all a heads up, but this is really just to facilitate the submission of the stage two, so an update, everyone on the path forward, which was tonight. Then December 14th, a school building meeting if necessary. December 21st, if necessary. But then a school building committee meeting to present and inform regarding the content of the submission on January 11th. Right, so school building committee meeting on January 11th, I would come here and say, this is our stage two.
You
You don't have to
do
vote.
it for us.
For
on the school
SBC,
building.
school building committee, this is just to present it to you. You don't have to recommend anything. This is it. The next day, school committee meeting to just present and inform regarding the content of the submission. That's January 12th. On January 18th, the school building committee would make a recommendation to submit the stage two. On January 23rd, town council meeting to present and inform of the submission. And we can add a footnote that the school building committee has voted to recommend submission. January 26th, we go to the school committee 3 days later and ask their approval to submit. Town council approval to submit on February 13th.
The day before.
Then we submit electronically on February 15th, 2 days later. And we have done these aggressive timelines in other communities. We have it packaged up and ready to go. But what this does is it gives the school building committee a couple chances to meet now and then have the stage two, and I have a huge caveat that I'll get to the end here. It gives the school committee a meeting to hear it, and then they vote the next meeting. Town council gets to hear it, and they vote the next meeting. The only caveat I have is that it is absolutely imperative that everyone knows that they will not be able to review the entire stage two document prior to their approval. It's simply not possible, and it takes every day between now and then to organize a submission. Please make sure everyone is expecting the same thing. Typically, part one, the summary section that includes the costs, the project, and the schedule is all that is presented for approval. Everything else is irrelevant because it will only be partially completed at that time that I come to you. So, for example, we would be projected to have part one for the school building meeting on January 11th to review. Then then on the January 12th for school committee. Then town council on the 23rd.
24th.
Oh, town council is the 24th? Okay.
Well, it'll be the the Tuesdays, the second and fourth Tuesday instead of Monday.
Oh, so then the
It'll be
town
the
council in February is when?
That turns into the
24th,
14th.
sorry, the 14th.
Oh, so town council would be voting the day before.
Let's hope there's no snow, power
Let's hope
outage.
there's no romance.
No.
I gotta take a day off. So if can I ask a simple question? If we're only presenting to them part of the stage two, the parts that you just described, so
Yeah.
the timeline, the basic project, do we need to have two meetings? Can we vote on the same meeting? And I don't wanna speak for like Anna or James or Kim or anybody who's on a committee with that has to consider these big votes, but if we're only presenting a short amount, why do we need to do two meetings?
Just as an additional question, kind of going along with yours. I mean, the town council technically meets the second and fourth Tuesday, but we've switched that before or thrown in an extra meeting for many things. So it's possible that people might be willing to have a meeting on February 7th, if that's early, if that's late enough for you. So while the 14th would be ideal, and if we know exactly how things are gonna run, 14th is great. But
If
I
you
do
can
think
get
there
a
have been-
commitment to have a meeting on the seventh, and then for whatever reason, they wanna fall
if we have
back to the
questions, the
14th,
14th,
it's a safe.
that's what I'd like to try to do, is at least get a meeting with a little wiggle room.
But, and that's the approval meeting. I still would
Right.
come to you on the 23rd
Sure.
with,
For the
with the part
presentation.
one and say, here it is. We'll be back in 2 weeks or so
Right.
for approval.
Yeah, we'll have something to work with at the 14th meeting, we can approve it then, and if people wanted just a couple more things buttoned up, we have an additional week as opposed to, okay, now it's too late.
So when we looked at all of this, the first one is the school building committee. You all recommend submission. I have that target on January 18th. So by January 18th, we will know project, cost, and schedule. So working backwards from that, maybe that's where the discussions need to be had on next meetings or what happens next.
It sounds like we need to do at least one meeting between now and December break. At least one, right? So should we try to schedule for the 21st?
Already have it in my calendar,
Do you?
because I just threw it out for every other weekend, I don't know how everyone else.
If you already have it in your calendar,
That's just me.
Let's just go with
I
that.
don't have any for the room.
So what would be on the agenda for that meeting?
so so let's kind of talk that out. So I think some of the stuff Mario is gonna send to us about how Johnston's done things, what the legislation looks like, how all that's handled, I think that needs to be discussed. I think we need to discuss our timeline. I think we also by then need to start really brainstorming how we're gonna solve the biggest problem, which is what do we do with all the people who work in around this building? Like that has to be figured out.
That's why I feel like we need a separate town council meeting to really sit and plan, how do we want to change our town buildings? I think it's a big question.
I mean,
It's not this committee's question.
been part of the
Discussion.
strategic planning discussion
Yeah.
since last year.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of proposals out there, and there's a lot of needs, so.
But I think you bring up a good point, Kim. Does that really involve, does that need to involve the school building?
No, but it's really what do we want to do? And you're gonna ask us to approve $76 million. We might decide to approve 85. You know, it's,
Right.
that becomes a different thing outside of this committee, I think.
But if it's tied to the vote, it all has
Yep,
implications,
100%.
so I think the town council is gonna definitely need a strategic planning session before January 18th, before we get into the final presentation and whatnot. Because we need to have what the solution is for the buses, for all the people, so.
Yeah, so if we could get that list put together and of just what we do with this building.
So
Okay.
is there also a possibility to kind of have a plan B too? So like, I know we're talking about like moving some of the school people like over to Oak Haven and, you know, wherever. Gonna put the rest, but what about like the police station? That's an empty building, right now, is
Oh,
that
the
possible?
old, the old police station?
Yeah, like, is there an opportunity to use some of those offices for something? And,
I don't know
That
if
has
it'll
a
be better
parking
than a
lot.
temporary mobile trailer, honestly.
okay, but I was even thinking like for the bus piece, like is
Could be the bus
behind,
stand.
behind the police station,
Not
or maybe this, who's ever in this building outside of the buses goes, you know, to a temporary trailer on that lot or whatever, and the buses maybe can go to Oak Haven. I don't know if the buses can go to Oak Haven, I don't know where any of them can go, I'm just saying that,
We can look at all those options, because that's part of the strategic discussion. So
Right.
raising ideas is totally fine,
right,
and vetting them out. And I think I know the town has invested a lot in this building over the years, and Public Works Director was really not happy with the idea of abandoning the investments just to demolish it for something here. So there's different perspectives that haven't really had a voice that it would be helpful to vet them so that we can speak with a unified voice on February 7th or 14th, so that when we go to the writing submission, there's no lingering doubts or objections because someone wasn't heard.
Right. And then also there might be some land even in town that, you know, could use, whether it's Stop and Shop. Like, would they be kind enough to allow us to put buses there, or they would?
Yeah, I reached out again today. I mean, I need to try again. That wasn't very successful, but
And then for the buses, just, you know, going on, could we split some of the buses to be near the police station and back and maybe here and have the fuel in here? But that way it gives you capacity for half.
maybe.
We also have off-season fields. I mean, I know they go park at Rice before they go to the middle school. I don't know if they can stay there overnight.
But it's not
Or Foster.
temporary, so.
I have one other question. So we presented information that town council hasn't seen yet. I think my gut feeling is that they should be presented this before this information meeting.
Mhm.
This
Yes.
is a pre-information meeting because it changed from the last presentation we gave. So I don't know when that fits in here.
I'd say send it out tomorrow.
Yeah, if you could just send this
Just-
information.
and I know Hillary's been really good at giving a narrative to talk about, hey, this is what we're discussing and this is how the conversation has progressed. I don't know if that's in our minutes and we just share that, but if we can keep them in the loop. I don't think we need to give them the full explanation, but we're sharing it with them so that when we do meet again, they've seen it.
I mean, we have a presentation, we have a YouTube video, we have minutes, so we can package that together. Just send that out.
That sounds good.
If we can get it together, I send out my weekly on Fridays to people, and I do town and school, so I'll just send it all out on that.
Is there a way to summarize your presentation on one page?
I was thinking that
Because
too.
no
If
one's
it
no one's
could,
gonna watch it. Let's be
if
real.
we could just say, last week we presented you with an $85 million project that consolidates two buildings. Based
For a
on,
$75 million bond,
right,
based on something that we'll say about PAYGO. We have developed a $95 million project that consolidates three schools, but still for $75 million bond.
I like 80.
Go with the 80.
I don't love to use the bond fluctuation, like whatever we might get over the bond. I don't really like to use that in my planning because it's not real money yet. And it might never be. The PAYGO money, if you get that approved, that's money. You used a pretty low number for what we could sell possibly two properties for. It's $250,000. I'm comfortable with that, but that other number is so maybe. I don't love having it as part of how we're determining our bond amount.
Leave it at 85.
Or you could swap, because the other piece is you could swap it out and perhaps the facility equity money would show up there, which is not accounted. 16 million doesn't, the facility equity would be extra if you get it, so perhaps we'll know in a few weeks if you'll get it, then you can swap that number. But yeah, let's move it, that would just be extra money to either do more work, do time work, or even reduce the bond to some lower number.
At the last meeting, we did present that we would seek voter approval for up to 85 million. So that, yeah, up to an
So-
85 million bond. So that could
So
still
without having
stay.
to ask for any more, we could consolidate a third school. It's the shortest
I like
narrative.
that. Actually, we're
Yeah.
asking for us, we'll come for 80. You went first school, that's a nice message. Actually. And then here's how. But I would do one pager, because no one's gonna watch
All right.
this video.
And
if they
have it
want to,
there
the
for
video's
them.
there.
Huh?
If they want to, it's there.
No, I'm saying, I like saying it, but I like doing a summary
Yeah.
because you did the estimate, so let's make it as easy as possible for everyone to get the information.
Did you say that we would get some sort of assurance from the commissioner prior to May?
I'm gonna try, well, if and the more we talk about it, the less likely a spring vote sounds like, just from, we're gonna have town projects and other things. I suspect it's not gonna happen. So you may not need it. If you're gonna push for it, you need something, I can try to get something signed, say this is the plan here. Take it, but the council's gonna approve on this date.
I think $8 million is worth pushing, like, trying to pull a vote into the spring. I don't know if anyone else agrees or disagrees, but that's a significant amount of money.
I think getting the spring vote is more important than what is gonna be in the vote. I mean, if the council wants to take on more project, great. If they don't, they won't. But I think the spring vote has to be the target.
All right, I'll map out maybe like 2 roadmaps, and we can include that also. That's the other piece, like, does Mac, you described what is needed for stage 2. There's a separate timeline. And it could be a faster one. To get the number, which is a reality.
Time between, like, my thought was that a spring, like they said, I've seen everything fail the first time, and then you have to do all of this legwork, and then there's a second vote before they say yes. So I feel like spring gives the opportunity for that. Is there some minimum time between?
Yeah, you can do it. Someone,
You can do it, yeah. It's more about the education and marketing campaign, if you actually have one. then
Yeah,
the spring-
hopefully the first vote
Right.
is the only vote.
Too often I see communities and governmental agencies underdo it for the first vote. And then when it fails, then they pull out the money and do it right for the second.
Yeah, let's just pull out our stops.
that's a good point, but there's, like, if some reason it fails, like a really just narrow margin, you have enough time in the same general assembly session to put it on again in November and then spend the time. So there's a lot of benefits to doing in spring, and I like the same benefit. Just giving people time.
Just
Giving
speak
people a
out.
year. All right. This is,
Today I was doing the presentation at my weights too.
I think you can find a good marketing company. PR firm.
With Hillary,
Hillary works
Hillary has
for a
that.
working firm, I don't, but
she'll be
she,
conflicted, but she may know something.
I'm guessing she could at least give good guidance. And I don't know if you know of other communities that have used certain marketing firms that might.
I do, I know some. The other piece, what others have done is, if you haven't done it yet, you should engage the PTOs of the 3 schools who are getting the new schools, because they will do all the work for you.
So that's actually a pivotal question, because a school committee member reached out to me that they've gotten bits and pieces of information, but not enough to really form an opinion in the positive or negative. And I think we want to get ahead of that, because we don't want people to think there are things happening to them. It's better when it's happening, with them. So I think that's super important.
To do that, I would suggest doing a big community open house in January. At the high school or someplace, and show it to the community and get parents and teachers involved to say we've done for the last 4 months, and get their support going into the other meetings.
I think we did something like that last time too. Didn't we do something at the high school before we did our big presentation? Unless I'm confused. But the one, we did one at the senior center.
Yeah.
But there was one before that I thought we did at the high school. Maybe I'm wrong. No? Maybe, you know what it was? It was the brainstorming session where people weighed in on the different designs.
We wanted to do open houses, but we didn't.
I know a lot of people, I specifically have, like, when they mention it, like, if I talk about it now, they're like, oh, whatever happened with that, like, kind of similarly, a lot of whispers got out. And then you guys were at actual events, right? So I feel like it started and people were looking more, so it's just like, once we start, we gotta just keep doing it until the vote.
Well,
I think.
the town Halloween trunk or treat, Luke and I stood there and gave out hundreds of flyers and had all our poster boards up, and we didn't have one person say they didn't like it. And most of them were people who had like little kids or kids that were not school age yet. And they were all like, this is great, we need something, and then it kind of just went away. So I think there are people out there that are still kind of curious. And that's why I kind of leaning towards a spring vote myself, because I want to like recapture the enthusiasm. I know it's a compressed timeline, but hit them hard and fast with a lot of good information and bring the vote. Because I think something happens over the summer and you lose people a little bit, and I don't want to risk that. But that's just my opinion.
No,
Yeah.
that's kind of a feedback I've been getting. And people don't differentiate, like we were talking, I don't know where I was talking about it, and everyone is like, they put up another Dollar General. They haven't put up a building school
Right,
yet.
we didn't
Like,
build
because
that.
they're in the same, exactly, it's the same.
The town approved the Dollar General.
We have two of them on the same road.
The town does.
Right next to each
Across
other.
from the Dollar Tree. Yeah, so I mean, I feel like once it hits, whatever that plan is for marketing comes in and then goes whoosh, 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 so. we can-
Right, it does need to be like that because people forget.
Yeah.
People's memories are so short. You could tell them about a meeting today, that's next Saturday, that they're interested in it. If you don't share it with them again Friday night, they're not.
So do you think we have enough? I mean, there's always plenty, but do you think we have enough for an agenda for December 21st to keep the meeting, to keep the ball rolling on this?
I think you should have one, yeah. I mean, I'll work on this one pager, work with you all to get it out.
That would be before the 21st, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Do the schools do assemblies anymore? Like,
Yeah.
because it could be a great time when you're going and giving kids awards for stuff to also have a small program on what the school building committee is planning on putting forth for the vote.
So I live in Cranston, and when they were preparing for that vote, and my kids were all middle school and high school, no, they were all high school. I couldn't go to a single thing at that school where they didn't talk about
Yeah,
this.
well,
They did announcements at ball games, they did announcements at every single presentation we went to, whether it was for the school, for the drama, for the band, it didn't make a difference. There was something that was said about it.
I think we should go on that route. We have school sports going on, plays, choir performances or what have you. Let's put it out at everything because you're getting a different subset of the community at all these things. If we're just trying to put something out for people to see visually, first through third graders are playing basketball at Washington Oak all day Saturdays, all winter long. If there's anything visual we could possibly present, just put it in front of people. Like you were saying, they're looking for more information. If they see it in front of them, they're really looking to see how it's going to progress. Like Alita said, people are still wondering when they get to vote on the middle school. So I think there are places where parents and children are, and grandparents, and people who, you know, care about these schools. And Washington Oak might be a good showcase spot where you're like, it's a nicer school. Let's build another nicer school.
All right, so we're gonna have a meeting on the 21st. We can collaborate on the agenda. It'll be here at 6:30. We can talk about what the presentation will be. It might be more of a work session more than anything. I think we need to spend more time on timeline than anything else, really. Figuring out what's gonna happen. All right, Mr. Pearson.
Any other questions on project deadlines or timelines? before we go on?
I just feel when would be the first time that we see something, from like a, you know, floor plan layout, or is there something kicking around I haven't seen perspective?
Sure, so we have one, and we're developing the documentation now because we want to send it off to the cost estimator in the next week or two.
It's on the drive, I'll look for it.
So, well, it's in the presentation,
Oh, okay.
and it'll be hard for you to see what you want to see. So I certainly can make that a part of our meeting next time.
Could you do it the way you did it in our last time around? When you did the middle school, you always had like an animation that was like a flyby animation. If you could come up with a design, even if it's not like totally worked out with the animation of what the outside would look like on the site, maybe some basic inside layout, thinking about the Eden Park model. I think it would be nice to have that, because if we do get to a point where we're communicating with people, they have to see something.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we'll shoot for that.
Anything else? Public comment, anyone on?
Yeah, so because we're under the school building committee, is under the school committee, we're following the same model that we follow, so we're just doing a YouTube video, live feed, we're not doing the Zoom.
Got it. No one on Zoom,
And it's not a joint meeting anymore because we don't have a conflict.
no one in the public here, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
All right.
Any opposed?